She was one of 6 siblings. She did have anxiety. However, her family reported that she was well organized and mindful of her situation. She was always in contact with her family, especially her sister, Kathleen. It was June 1996 when contact between Annie and her sister stopped suddenly. Annie was not answering any calls, and she had missed a dinner date with the man she was dating named Michael Scanlon. This really made Kathleen worry, so she recruited their brother, Robert, and the two of them went to Annie's apartment, which was located on the 3rd floor of a large house in Wilmington, Delaware. When the two arrived to the apartment, they were relieved to see that Annie's green Jetta was parked outside in its usual spot. They did speak to Annie's landlord to see if she had heard from her or knew anything about where she was. However, Annie was a pretty quiet tenant, so the landlord didn't really find it odd that he hadn't heard from her for the last several days. It was 10 p.m. on a cool summer night when Kathleen entered her sister's apartment. It was dark, and a foul odor seeped from inside. Kathleen was smart. She rushed to the bathroom, thinking maybe her sister had slipped in the shower and was unable to get help. She opened the door, and there was nothing. She hurried to the bedroom next, but again, Annie was nowhere to be found. But Kathleen did notice that Annie's bedroom was in kind of an odd state of disarray. Dry cleaning bags had been ripped open, shoe boxes were tossed around the room, and, more notably to Kathleen, Annie's suitcase was still in the closet. The settee had a dress thrown over it, as if Annie had planned to wear it. And, strangest of all, a Talbot's box was found. An expensive pantsuit was still wrapped up inside. And I say this is strange because it worried Kathleen, because she and Annie had gotten into a fight about this exact pantsuit. They had found it during a shopping trip that they'd gone on, and it was far too expensive for Annie to afford. And the two sisters had actually argued over whether or not she should purchase it. But in the end, Annie did not purchase it. So Kathleen wondered, how did this end up in her sister's apartment? Kathy investigated further, and the foul odor was coming from the kitchen. Rotting fruit and vegetables were found in Annie's fridge. The final sign of alarm to Kathleen and Robert was Annie's purse was still sitting in the apartment. At this point, Kathleen is extremely alarmed that something has happened to her sister. She never would have left her apartment in such a state, so she calls the police. As far as I can tell, because it was 1996, there's not a lot on the internet, but authorities seemed to move pretty quickly in Annie's case. They came to the apartment and they started searching, and they found 3 unsigned letters from the office of Thomas Capano, hustle and a political consultant. Overall, Thomas was seen as a man of good standing and respect. He was smart, well-dressed, and articulate. He made a good impression on people with his confident but friendly manner. It was 1994 that Capano's fall from grace began. He was married to a woman named Kay Ryan, and the two of them had 4 daughters. But Thomas and Kay got divorced in 1995. Around this time is when he began a relationship with Annie. Their relationship was only known to a small group of friends and staff at the governor's office. According to rumors, Thomas had several additional affairs also happening at this time as well. He was a busy guy. Tom, like the textbook rich admirer, would gift Annie. He gave her clothes, shoes, a TV, books, money, and even appliances, and went so far as to offer to purchase her a new car and a different apartment for her to live in. For any young woman on a $30,000 a year salary, his attentions would be flattering. Annie was undeterred by the fact that this man was married. Unfortunately, she realized a little too late the type of man she was dealing with, though. She wrote in her diary that, quote, "I allowed someone to take control of every decision in my life. A controlling, manipulative, insecure, jealous maniac." End quote. Tom would use his wealth, age, and power to tell Annie what to wear, what to eat, and whom she should associate with. So Annie quickly becomes unhappy in her relationship with Tom, and she decides, well, if he's gonna date other people, I'm gonna date other people. So she starts an affair with 31-year-old Michael Scanlon, who I mentioned earlier. So Tom is a serial womanizer, and he has countless affairs with other women. But, like the typical narcissistic jerkface, he couldn't tolerate that Anne-Marie cared for someone else. She had kind of broached the fact with him that maybe the two of them should not continue this affair any longer. And he just couldn't handle it. I think it's absolutely very telling that she kept her relationship with Tom a secret, not just from her friends and her family, but from everyone. That's very telling to me. So, authorities, back to Annie going missing. Authorities search her apartment, and they found her diary, and it held incriminating evidence about her relationship with Tom. Further interviews with people who were close to Annie confirmed these feelings towards Tom. They described him as obsessive and jealous. Annie's hairdresser reported that Annie had been scared of Tom, and even her therapist backed this up. So these people knew of his existence in her life, but they didn't know how deep it went. Additionally, and this really creeped me out, neighbors reported that Tom was often seen just sitting outside of her apartment building in his Jeep Grand analysis. This is an investigative procedure to look into the timestamp of the toll roads. They seized emails from Tom's law firm and from Annie's office. They took CCTV footage. They analyzed purchase of gun records and financial records. And through these means, lead detective Robert Donovan discovered the first of Tom's many lies in this case. The initial lie was simple. On the night of Annie's disappearance at 10 p.m., Tom claimed to have stopped at a Getty station to purchase cigarettes. However, after interviewing the gas station attendant who knew Tom, the attendant said he never saw Tom that night, and more importantly, the gas station closed at 9:30, so there was no way Tom could have stopped at 10. So the police, having caught Tom in a lie, bring him back in for another interview. And in this one, he's agitated and uncooperative. Detective Donovan goes on to check with the restaurant that they had dined in the night before Annie went missing and found it was not as amicable as Tom had initially led investigators. Tom was described as domineering. He ordered Annie's food for her. She didn't like that, apparently. Annie had, in fact, looked ill, and they were both just reportedly in a foul mood, and they had barely touched their food. So, as I said, they looked into their credit card records, and in fact, the FBI has been brought in because now this case spans 2 states, Delaware and Philadelphia, and they uncover a strange purchase of new carpets from Wallpaper Warehouse made by Tom 2 days after Anne-Marie goes missing. The $308 used to purchase a new rug made police suspect foul play. They wondered, had he rolled her body into an old carpet and thus needed a new one? When they spoke to the household staff, they discovered that Tom had requested his housekeeper not to come in to work for a week, and when she did return, she found a love seat and an old carpet missing. He had also reportedly inquired about blood-removing products at a local store. So Tom's shifting stories about the night of the dinner and his behavior finally make police search his house. And when they use luminol, they discover 2 splotches of blood, and the DNA would later be discovered to match Anne-Marie's. Testimony from a site manager of one of the building contracting places that Tom managed said that Tom had ordered 4 large dumpsters at the site to be emptied, even though they weren't full yet. And I have to believe that that was the love seat that went missing. The team also recovered an extensive letter describing details about his relationship with Annie, as well as a timeline that claimed Tom was with his younger brother Gerard the day after Annie had gone missing. So this brings younger brother Gerard into the spotlight, and eventually the other brother Louis. The 2 of them cooperated fully with the police. They actually became This was one of Tom's other mistresses, and why he had it and she didn't, I wasn't able to uncover. But after he shot Annie, he forced her body into a large white igloo cooler. He then recruits his brothers, and the three of them get on a boat and they take the remains 70 miles off of the New Jersey coast, where they attempt to dump Annie's body into the ocean. To Tom's extreme dismay, when they dumped the cooler overboard, it refused to sink. This led Gerard to shoot the cooler full of holes with a shotgun. However, it still refused to sink. And they're on the boat and they're panicking, so Gerard gives Tom an anchor and a chain, and, unable to watch, turns his back as Tom removes Annie's body from the cooler, throws up, ties the body to the anchor, and tosses her overboard. Gerard turned back just in time to witness a human foot sink into the water, and then they threw in the cooler as well. Unfortunately, authorities never uncovered exactly where Annie's body was dumped, and it has never been recovered. Besides the DNA that they found in Tom's car, the only other physical evidence was the cooler. It had been found a week after the murder by a group of fishermen who took it home and used it for their catches for a year before hearing of this case and turning it over to authorities. The trial of Thomas Capano occurred over 2 years after Annie had disappeared. The 12-week trial captivated the public from October 1998 to January 99. A classic case of men in positions of power trying to exert absolute control over their victims. The defense argued that instead of intentional murder, it was an accident. It was claimed that Debbie, the other woman, had found Tom and Annie together, and in a jealous rage threatened to shoot herself. Tom reached for the gun and this resulted in a wrestling match between the two, which then resulted in a misfire that killed Annie. What a load of crap. Deliberations lasted 3 days. The jury started out by taking a poll to see what everyone's stance was, and it turned out they were split. Those who believed that Tom Capano was not guilty wondered how he could have stuffed a 5'10" body into this Joseph Capano guilty of first-degree murder of Anne Marie Fahey. The judge sentenced Tom to death, but in 2006 it was overturned, and then he was resentenced to life without the possibility of parole. During his I just jumped like 3 lines. During his years of confinement, he deteriorated into a shell of his former self. He passed away of a heart attack on September 19th, 2011, at age 61. Infuriatingly, the obituary called him a loving father who would be dearly missed, but did not mention his murder conviction. His brothers did serve some time for being accomplices in this case. This case is miserable to me. Having been in a relationship like this, I know how hard it is to get away. I also know how easy it is to say yes when they are showering you with things you can't afford or even dream about being able to afford. So I can't falter for that. Obviously, I didn't read her diary, so I don't know if she was hearts and flowers over this man when everything first started, but I do have an extreme amount of respect for her for realizing she needed to get away from him. However, that type of man is not going to allow it to happen. So what I believe happened is they were at Tom's house and they got into a fight about ending their relationship. And Tom, much like other men in this situation that are like this, decided that if he couldn't have her, no one could. Maybe she had told him about Michael at this point, that she was moving on, that she'd met someone else that she wanted to be with, and this escalated Tom's tendencies, and he thought, nuh-uh, you're not leaving here. I believe that he got rid of the rug and the love seat because there was blood on it, and they were in the dumpsters that he had emptied, because there was no way she was wrapped in the rug in the ice chest. And then I think it sucks for his brothers, 2 brothers, not the third, because the one brother said he didn't even see the body. The only thing he saw was that foot as it went down into the ocean. I'm telling you that I love my siblings so much, but I am not the come help me hide a body girl. Don't call me if that is a situation. Yes, I know quite a bit about true crime. I could probably think of a way, but I'm not helping you do that. So, I mean, talk about some family bonds there. Yes, let's use my boat. I did read in one article that the boat was sold later, and the police discovered it was without the anchor and the chain, and that made them realize that that is potentially where Annie's body ended up. I just think that it is absolutely horrible that she has never been found and her family has never been able to properly lay her to rest. I hate that, and that is one of the worst ways for a case to end. Whenever I am researching them, I just absolutely hate the idea of not knowing where are options out there. And I know from experience that it is as simple as slipping a note to the nurse at your doctor's office. Because that has happened to me. So, I want to thank you guys so much for being here tonight. I'm going to link some resources in